Well, here we are, friends. Welcome to the February 20th, 2025 meeting of the Southborough Historical Commission. It's 7:01 p.m. and I'm calling the meeting to order with a notation that we have a full house with the exception of our vice chair who's unavailable tonight, Annie Pfaff, but otherwise it's myself, Grant Farrington, Michelle Hilkinson, Kelly O'Brien, and Dan Blanchard. And we're also joined to start out by Sally Waters, who, as you all know, has been doing fantastic research for us for quite some time now. Sally, I don't even know how long it's been, but you've really been slaving away at this for a year plus at this point. Um, is that right? You're muted. You're still muted.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. It's been about a
Um,
year, right?
it's been at least a year, and it's mainly because I'm paranoid about missing somebody or something like that. So I've been double checking, triple checking,
Right.
and going over and over it.
Well, that's much appreciated because I'm as paranoid about getting this wrong as you are. And what we're talking about, friends, of course, is um, the issue of Revolutionary War veterans in the old burial ground. And I don't want to spend too much time rehashing old territory, but just for anybody that might look in on this later and wonder why this is an issue, is as those of you that are here know, it principally has to do with the issue of unmarked graves, and most of that is pursuant to the hurricane in 1938 that destroyed so many gravestones. And there's been some attrition, I think, over the years, tree limbs and that those sorts of issues. But we got into this conversation a couple of years ago now. It was actually prompted by an approach from the representative of the Massachusetts Sons of the American Revolution, and they were interested. They had a program um, basically installing plaques inscribed with the names of Revolutionary War veterans in historic burial grounds in Massachusetts. And Southborough, as I explained to the gentleman at the time, was in a rather unique position because we have so many unmarked graves. And we have quite a lot because our burials are entirely centralized, with one exception, which Sally has noted, in terms of the Revolution, that they're all in the old burial ground. So the Massar thing sort of fell by the wayside because they frankly considered they had limited funds, and our plaque was going to be too expensive because there's so many names on it. I mean, we had this issue of trying to differentiate marked graves versus unmarked graves. So you can't move forward. And, we had decided that ultimately this was something that we're going to have to do on our own, come up with the money, whether that's through fundraising or if we can get it in our budget. As we talked about last time when Annie was reviewing our annual budget requests, basically what we tried to do was get us back to the level of funding that the Historical Commission had 7 or 8 years ago, not even fully adjusted for inflation. If we get that, we may well be able to do this straight out of the budget, which is one of the reasons I asked for essentially a restoration of funds, because we had gone down quite a bit in our request during COVID because we were hamstrung by all kinds of factors, not least the death of our sign painter for the historic house sign program. So where we are at is that, I remain committed to this despite the challenges that we faced, the loss of the Massar support, and so on. But I remain, fully, as I know the rest of you do, committed to getting this project done. But the feeling has been from the beginning that we can't go forward with something like this. You put something in bronze, you want to make sure it's right, because essentially forever. So Sally has been working really, really hard going over this and going over it and over it again, and really making sure, attempting to make sure that the research is really locked down. And I think, Sally, the original list that you had, the current count, I would say, doggone near final count, runs now to 68 names. That would be 32 in marked graves and 36, which is the kind of shocking number, in unmarked graves. So a total of 68. And I believe, Sally, that's down from um, something like 78 or 82 at one point when we were doing, you were involved in preliminary work on this. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it was down from about 88. And what has happened is that I found some that had been on the, well, let me just back up for a minute. I started out on this project using a publication by the Historical Society and the militia back in the 1970s and 80s. They did the research in the 70s and published it in 85. And I was using their research, and it was absolutely invaluable as a jumping off point. But I did find some of the unmarked graves I found where the people were buried either in Vermont or that I had originally had on the unmarked list. They're buried in Vermont or New Hampshire. So that eliminated a few on the unmarked side. On the marked side, I've eliminated 10. And that's because those guys did not fight. Or there was a case of mistaken identity or things along those lines. And I do have the research that I think really backs up the fact that those people need to actually, and this is where it's going to become controversial, or could become controversial, they need to have their little flags removed from the burial ground.
Right,
And
and we'll get to that. That's the second document, and I
yeah,
did send that out to the group, and I'll bring it up. The one thing I would just say about that, I think this research is going to be invaluable, and once we are 100% locked in, and I think we should go through the process of standard peer review that is typical of any kind of academic research, which is what this is. That this will be invaluable in conversation with, I think, as I understand it, I believe the post of Veterans Grave Officer in Southborough is currently vacant. Mr. Wynot, Steve Wynot, who formerly occupied that position, having resigned. We have a veterans officer, but that individual's concerns are quite a bit different. But the flags, of course, are really handled through the Veterans Grave Officer, and again, that position in Southborough is currently vacant, in coordination with the VSOs. Here, the VFW, and Mr. Wynot is actually the post commander in Southborough for the VFW, and then Dan Calenda, who's the commander of the American Legion post. And I have spoken with Mr. Calenda on this topic. He's very supportive. So I think, once we're locked in and sure on our end and the information, I think would be useful for us to sit down with those gentlemen and sort of run through this. But one thing I would say is, of course, that we don't have the Historical Commission. What I hope to offer to the VSO people, again, in the absence of a Veterans Grave Officer in place right now, is what I would regard as an advisory opinion on the matter of the flags, because the Historical Commission, of course, doesn't really have jurisdiction over that. We don't place the flags. we don't have any authority to tell those folks to put them in or take them out or anything like that. But I like to think that they'll be extremely appreciative of the refinements, Sally, that you've made, because I think, they, of course, I'm sure feel exactly as we do, is that we want, um, and you've added one, you've got one on this list, someone who is not currently honored with a flag and the holder at the grave, and who should, right? That's the Daniel Henry Gardner, the guy who was, served in a privateer, right?
Yeah, and supposedly he was with John Paul Jones on the Bonhomme Richard. So uh,
Yeah,
90,
yeah, it's fantastic. And so I think, I'm presuming those folks, I don't want to speak for them, but I would think they'd be thrilled to find that bit out, just as they'd be welcoming to the fact that, based on your research, there are a number of flags placed, in the one case, it on the grave of a 4-year-old, right, who
Mhm.
clearly didn't didn't serve in the revolution. So what Sally has done again is, based on just a lot of painstaking research that's gone over many months. And again, as Sally explained, having taken this original list that was derived, that was work done by the Historical Society folks, right? And
Mostly I always have to look at exactly what they called themselves. The Historic Research Committee of the Southborough Companies of Militia and Minutemen,
wow, okay.
with support with support from the Historical Society. Yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
that's
And
what I started with.
yeah,
Um,
and I would assume it would probably have been that committee would have been, VSO people. But again, this was research that was done 50 years ago. And as Sally points out in the second document about the flags, um, the that booklet published in 1985, says, I'm going to read this, Sally. It says, it is
yeah.
intended as a starting point for additional research aimed at determining who fought for Southborough either as a resident or non-resident enlisted for the town during the Revolutionary War. This pamphlet is likely to include people who did not fight for Southborough, as well as those too old or too young for the war. So they left themselves a wide open, you know, uh, we're sorry, there might be errors here kind of thing. Those names should be omitted in future revisions to this pamphlet. Additional research is likely to yield additional names to be added to this list, which turned out to be true in one instance. And but so so that's where we're at. So Sally, and another thing that people, anybody who watches this later might be interested to know is this is not easy stuff. There are no fewer, for instance, on this list between, again, 32 marked graves and 36 unmarked graves. There are no fewer than 11 Newtons. 5 of them in marked graves, 6 of them in unmarked graves. There is a Hezekiah Fay in a marked grave and Hezekiah Fay Jr. in an unmarked grave. So you know what I'm saying? Like it's not easy. There are a lot of prominent names in town. There are a lot on both sides of the ledger. The one that really caught my eye, Sally, was that, Hezekiah Fay, presumably the father, correct, in
Yeah.
the marked grave, and the son, also a veteran of the Revolution, currently in an unmarked grave. So, so that's the kind of thing that we're, looking to rectify. I would also say, just again, I'm not sure if you all probably are aware of this or may not be or have forgotten. It's a little bit tricky because if I just want to share my screen with you for 1 second. I'm going to get my desktop and because there are a couple of markers already um, in the old burial ground. One is this one. That's on an upright stone um, just inside the entrance. And this is more of a general marker that um, They went with this oldie stuff. Old burial grounds. Tablet was erected in, I believe that's 1995, in memory of the members of the early generations of the town who were buried here. So that's everybody, obviously, civilians and veterans, in graves marked and unmarked between 1727 and 1895. And so that's obviously an upright stone, not far from where the gated entrance is. Also, however, there is a specifically Revolutionary War plaque in the OBG. This one is a horizontal, like right on the ground. Again, you see it's inset into a piece of granite, and that is at the base of the American flag. The flagpole that's, there was at one point there was a bit of controversy about ancillary battle flags, but the way it is now, inside the boundaries of the OBG, there's just the single flagpole with the U.S. flag, and this is what sits at the foot of it. And what this notes, as you can see there, dedicated in honor of Southborough's American Revolutionary War veterans, 1775 to 1783, with eternal gratitude to those who made the supreme sacrifice. And then they list the three who actually died, right, in conflict. This was erected by the Southborough veterans. That would have been I'm assuming a coordinated effort between Legion people and the VFW in 2002. So you follow what I'm saying? Like you've got, and you're always worried about sort of bronze overkill. But what we're trying to do is something, I think in a way rectifying what's a kind of considerable wrong, in the idea that, again, because of natural disaster, essentially, 85, 90 years ago, we've got the situation where we've got more unmarked Revolutionary War veterans' graves in the OBG than we have marked. And so that's what we're trying to correct. So Sally's refined her list, again, 32 marked, 36 unmarked. I sent that document out to you. I'm going to bring that up just briefly so we can kind of have it in the public record. Just don't mind my futzing around with here we go. So this is the list. And is it fair to say, Sally, that there's a good deal of research behind every name here, obviously?
Yes, a lot.
And you feel, I think quite confident. One thing that Sally pointed out to me, and I did go and have a look at this myself. Sally pointed out that there is one Revolutionary War veteran who's actually buried in a rural cemetery, lived long enough to end up interred there. One Jacob Winchester. And Sally and I had, Sally, do you know what Jacob's relationship would have been to William Winchester, who's on your list as unmarked?
I have to go. He probably is his brother.
Brother or son, maybe? I don't mean to put you on the spot on that.
I'm just, there are so many that my brain gets a little.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But so that one, I said to Sally, I would strike that for the purposes of a plaque that's only addressing people in the OBG. Jacob Winchester's headstone, for instance, in the rural cemetery, if I recall correctly, I did look this up, is extant. So it's not an issue. So again, we're at those 68 names in total, 32 marked, 36 unmarked. The other part of the question here was I'm going to bring up the second document that I sent out to you and that Sally shared with me, and that this one concerns per Sally's research. These are people that have come off the list of they um, per Sally's research should not be on a plaque of veterans that would be whether marked or unmarked. By the way, that you remember that we've talked about this plaque at some length, and I'm itching to get down to an absolute final list so that we can start talking about design. And you have to think about design with those pre-existing markers in mind, because they're doing different things, but where it would be placed and what would be appropriate. You know, my thought, given that you have so many names, was to consider the possibility of a double-sided um, bronze marker that would have the marked graves on one side and the unmarked on the other. The other option would be to simply to list them all in order and to have some sort of, symbol of that would be explained for instance, the graves that are unmarked, so that, you know what I mean? Like that somebody coming to visit and pay their respects in the OBG, would not engage in a feudal quest, having found Hezekiah Fay, to find Hezekiah Fay Jr. because Hezekiah Fay Jr. is unmarked. You follow? But how we do that is, I think, a topic of discussion, both among us and also with our vendor, and what can be done. And I'd be open and interested if you folks have seen other examples of how this is done. I have seen, cases where this is done with some sort of asterisk or symbol. But again, a double-sided plaque or simply two different columns on the same side might be an option. Go ahead, Kelly.
My concern is just like Sally did her research and she's found some that shouldn't be on there. And what we're doing now, what if later on we find out some other ones should be on there? So with this plaque that we're doing, are we going to get those names that just because I wasn't at the last meeting, are we doing the plaques that are we doing this plaque that you add names as you go? Or are these going to be embedded in the plaque? Because I've
Yeah,
seen those kind.
right. Well, if it's a bronze marker, which has been the conception from the beginning, once it's done, it's done. Think of something like, something that's done in granite or some, like the Vietnam memorial. I believe there have been names that have been subsequently added. You know what I mean? Like if it was a wall of granite kind of thing, you can always add a name if you slip up or there's new information. But I think once bronze is cast, it's cast, which is, part of the reason why, I'm so concerned about trying to get it absolutely right. And I'm not aware of, any alternative to that. Other than to just do your best and get it right. And, this is why I would want to run all this stuff past the, make sure that we internally review this as carefully as possible, and then have the buy-in of the veterans groups,
Gotcha.
because we're really trying to work on their behalf. So, I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to add at this point, or if I should just plow ahead. Well, raise your hand if you do. This is the second document. Oh, go ahead, Grant.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
just a quick thing. The only thing that I was thinking about, I didn't know that there was a Revolutionary War veteran in the rural cemetery, but I guess I'm wondering, should this be a comprehensive list of all Revolutionary veterans or only the ones in the old burial ground?
Well, I thought of
Just
it
because
because,
it seems to me like
yeah, the
it would just
plaque,
be excluding him just because he happened to live
Mhm.
long enough or something to be in the other cemetery. I'm not, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could, I don't see if there was a strong feeling that way, there wouldn't be a problem with, listing that name perhaps last with a notation in the rural cemetery. You could do that. I think that my own conception of that, this marker would be, this is to let people know who's here,
Mm,
meaning in the OBG,
yeah.
and that 32 are in marked graves, 36 are in unmarked. Um, we Sally and I have discussed that in conjunction with this, and I know this is Sally's ultimate goal, is to rework that 1980s pamphlet. So it would include not only a comprehensive list, including the guy who's in the rural cemetery, but as much information as we can provide about their stories and their histories. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
for instance, the guy in the privateer, kind of thing, because it is really interesting. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you. Sally, this question is addressed to you. Can I ask where you did your research? Did you like go on Fold 3, or did you go through Southborough's records? I'm just curious.
I, yes, I went through Fold 3. I went through the New England Genealogical Society, American Ancestors. I used Ancestry. I used town records that Jeremy Berry had been organizing. And for example, the American Ancestors gave me access to a lot of wills, which were helpful to make sure that I had the right person and the right son of and so forth. Um, it also gave me access to a lot of records of guardianship so that I could verify who's who. For example, in the Ball family, there were a lot of them, and I wasn't sure whether they were brothers and sisters, but I found that because their father had died, their uncle in Waltham had become guardians to 5 of them, and Ezra Taylor in Southborough had become guardian to the 2 oldest ones. So that, verified for me that they were all siblings and so forth. Because when I'm writing the stories, I want to be able to incorporate that kind of stuff. That wasn't quite as important for the um, just the list. Fold 3 gave me access to a lot of the military records, and especially to applications for pensions, which were invaluable. And for example, for Solomon Newton, I read through 93 pages of a pension not for him, but for a Ward, somebody with the last name of Ward, and Josiah Ward. And he gave a statement in favor of Ward getting a pension and gave all sorts of information about him from his childhood and so forth. But never once did he say, I too was a veteran, whereas a lot of the other deponents had said, I served with him, et cetera, et cetera. So that helped me kind of conclude that he was not a veteran. The other place I went, and this may sound a little strange, but or not, to the DAR records, and not one of these guys that I've say did not serve, not one of them is claimed as an ancestor by anybody in the DAR. If you understand what I'm saying, so nobody has said, yes, this was my ancestor, and yes, he was a veteran. Solomon Newton showed up in one application for the Sons of the American Revolution, but he was not cited as the veteran. His son was cited as the veteran. So, yeah, I used a lot. I tried to use as many sources as I possibly could.
And
Thank you.
Sally, sorry, I was just going to throw in that, Sally, you also mentioned like in this document about the the folks that you think should not be included and that they're currently, marked with flags and stuff. You reference Massachusetts Soldiers and Sailors a lot, which is the full title of
Yes.
which is Massachusetts Soldiers
Yep.
and Sailors of the Revolutionary War, a compilation from the archives, right? Originally published in 1896 and sort of the definitive,
Yes,
am I
yes.
correct in saying that, pretty comprehensive guide to anyone who served in the Revolution from Massachusetts. So that just to clarify, because you referenced Mass Soldiers and Sailors quite a bit in this.
Yes, I did use that a lot. I used both the hard copies that were at the Historical Society and online copies.
Kelly, I'm sorry, Kelly, I think I stepped on your line though.
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank you for the details. I was just curious. And so thank you for going into that. I appreciate it.
So so here is the list, and I'm a little bit reluctant to sort of, I don't want to be reading. This is a 3-page document, but Sally, walks us through who these, Alpheus Fay and why he should not be listed. Quite young, not in Mass Soldiers and Sailors. Appears on a 1794 militia list, but that doesn't appear in any of the town documents relating to the war, and so on. I mean, this Jonas Ball. One of the things that you see Sally pointing out in a lot of this information is that as I'm correct in saying, Sally, many of these people were active in town affairs, and for instance, in support of the war effort, or they paid fines in lieu when the town needed to meet its quota. But the common thread that runs through this list of names is that they're too old, they're too young, they have record of civic service or paying fine when the militia is trying to meet its quota in the case of Isaac Johnson, but that there's no evidence of military service in all the various records that you consulted. And a lot of this has to do with the names. I think the Elijah Newton one was I think that was the one that you had even the scintilla of question inside your own mind still. But I thought you made a pretty good case for here that the Elijah Newton, there are 4 of them listed in Mass Soldiers and Sailors, are all different Elijah Newtons than the one that lived in Southborough. So it would, but that was to me was the common thread, that these are people in some cases of considerable significance to Southborough, but do not appear, or they would appear on a militia list at some point, or this Ezra Taylor, civic leader, was a selectman, but no record of military service. And then you clarify why there was an Ezra Taylor listed in Mass Soldiers and Sailors, but from Berkshire County, and so on. So to me, that was this, if you read through this document, that was the common thread. And I don't know if you folks had a chance to look at that or had any questions about it. I'd like to get this up. We'll post this with the minutes. I'd like to allow some time for anyone interested member of the public has a comment. But I'd also like to get this once everybody's comfortable with it, and I have a proposal about how we get to that point, but that we share this with Mr. Wynot and Mr. Kalenda for their feedback. And, what do they think? And again, we don't have jurisdiction over the matter of the flags. We simply are trying to compile an accurate list for a marker. But the comments at the end, I mean, Sally adds that this David Henry Gardner should have a flag and doesn't, which I thought was really interesting. This is the guy that served on the privateer. Yeah, I think
Just
that.
let me-
Sally, what do you have
he-
to add? Yeah.
He might possibly have a flag. I had asked Mr. Wynot for a list of the people that he put the flags at, and because I guess I misunderstood him at a previous meeting, I thought he said he had a list, and he said he had no list. So I walked around the graveyard one day and made my own list of those that have flags, either for the colonial wars, the War of 1812, or the Revolution. It's possible I missed his grave, but I did look up on Find a Grave, and the pictures there did not show a flag, because I wasn't going to go, when I realized that he was missing one, I wasn't going to go out this week with the icy conditions to try to find whether he did or not. So I depended on the Find a Grave photo, and there was no grave, no flag there. Excuse me.
Well, I mean, ultimately, like I said, I think this information, I hope, will be both persuasive and helpful to them in their, what I always take a certain sort of, to me, it's a sign of spring. When they're, those folks are out there putting up those flags, and I'm definitely one of these people who's, how they get blown out of their holders all the time, and I'm picking them up and putting them back, looking for the empty holder so I can put it back in, kind of thing. If I happen to be down there, both there and in the rural cemetery. So I hope that's helpful to them. So I have where I'm at this point, and again, with infinite thanks to Sally for hanging in there and really, really working hard to get this refined. I do feel very strongly that, Dan, you had, helped out and kind of given in an early round, right, that, that you sat down and kind of reviewed, right, what's, the work that Sally had done. And I would just like to, I don't know if you're interested in doing, taking a second look. I'd like to have somebody on the commission, other than me, kind of review this, just so, and I, like I looked at Sally, the document about on the flags, and, I nicked a couple little typos, utterly insignificant, the kind of stuff that I do all the time. But I would, I think it's important to have somebody review this. So I don't know if I can't even see Michelle right now on the lineup, but there you are. Let me turn off the screen share. I can see better. If Dan, Grant, Michelle, Kelly, any of you four would care to volunteer to step forward and just sit down with everything that Sally's got, and just two heads are better than one. I mean, I anything I write, I need someone to look at, because there's some terrible mistake in it all the times, some ridiculous typo that I'm appalled that I've made. I can't help it. So anybody, want to do this?
So what exactly do you need, Kevin? Because I find this very interesting, but can I actually add to the validity of it all? Probably not, because I don't have access to any of these sites. But I can certainly read through everything and just give my opinion, but I feel that we should all do that.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think Dan, you just gave a little thumbs up. I mean, Dan, I feel like this is really up your alley in particular, maybe, if you're interested or amenable.
I mean, I can I can take a look at it. I don't think similar to Michelle, I don't think I'm going to add anything.
Yeah.
And I've stated pretty clearly that, I mean, Massachusetts Soldiers and Sailors is pretty definitive
Right.
in terms of service records.
Right.
And Sally's gone way and above and beyond that. So.
Yeah, that's my view of it as
if
well. That Sally has kind of really, driven the nail home and countersunk it, and put a nice finish over top of it, kind of like it's really good carpentry, if I'm extending my metaphor past its useful life. But I think if want to be mindful of open meeting requirements, but I think we're okay if, like Dan, you wanted to take a look. It's just like meeting minutes to me. And then, if Michelle, if you were willing to give it one read through, and if anything of substance, I think has to come back to an open meeting. But if you just look at it, I just want another set of eyes. I think Sally does as well, because you just want to. You can make a silly mistake or something that once it goes into bronze, you don't want to be regretting the rest of your life, kind of thing. So that's the way I would feel. Go ahead, Sally.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One, when, Kelly made the observation of what happens if we find somebody that should be on it and so forth. I actually think I have found a person that should be listed with those three men who died. He was a young man named Joel Amsden, and he died in 1775 after going to Dorchester Heights. And none of them died in battle. They all died of disease or starvation or whatever. And so his name probably should be on there too, but it's a little late. He's buried in New Hampshire, as it happens. But he did enlist for Southborough. And the second thing is just if you are double checking anything and everything, you have to be very careful of the use of the word junior in colonial research, because it did not necessarily mean that it was the son of the person with the same name. If there were two people of the same name in the town, the younger one was oftentimes called junior, whether he was a blood relative or not. There's that. And just thirdly, on March 27th, I'm going to be meeting with the person that for many, many years was the head genealogist for the New England Genealogical Society. And I'm going to ask him to go over just a couple of the people that I have designated to lose their flags, just to double check my research. I can report back on whether he thought I did a okay job on that.
That's great, and I appreciate it. And I think, again, I'm willing to wait another 5 weeks to make sure we get it right. Maybe, Dan, if you were just willing to sort of sit down and look especially closely at that, and I didn't get to send that out until, a couple hours ago, the document regarding the flags to be removed, and look at both really carefully. And if you have any questions, come back to us. Or I think you can fairly deal. You and Sally have worked together before, and again, I'm trying to be mindful of open meeting requirements. I think it's okay just to have it's not serial deliberation, but just to review for technicalities in a document, which we would bring back to open meeting and discuss. For instance, if Dan, you look at it and you want you think there should be any change whatsoever, we'll bring it back on another agenda. And Michelle, I think that it's fairly for you to take a look at it as well. And just the next time we convene, if Sally's going to meet with another expert on March 27th, it's probably going to be an April meeting. If we could, Sally, if you could come back and say, yeah, my expert says everything's lock solid. Then we turn to Dan. Dan says, I looked at it really carefully. I don't have any questions. Michelle, you might have one little thing, or you know what I mean? I think we'd do this in an open meeting again. And I'm at the point now where I think I'm comfortable enough with the numbers that we have that I can turn to I'm going to go back and just for now, query the vendor that did the National Register signs for us because they just came out so spectacularly, and they've been very reasonable and very good to work with. They also did the Rural Cemetery Water Tower sign for us, and come back to you folks on my end with that in April of what our options might be. And even, Sally, this issue of you think there may be, in terms of deaths during the Revolution, a fourth name on that plaque that's at the foot of the flag. I don't frankly think that would be an expensive plaque to replace. And I might inquire about what it would cost us to rectify that wrong. If you feel fully comfortable with the intelligence that you have on that point. So is it fair enough as a game plan for everybody? And if again, if you have some brain lightning on this, I think I still very much like the idea of something in the vein of what the Massar Fellow had initially proposed, and I know I've shown that to you on a previous occasion. So just a National Register-esque looking plaque on a pole. That would probably be right at the entrance. Again, there could be some discussion about, like I said, the two existing ones. One are the deaths in war-related during the Revolution, and then the other, the one on that stone, of course, is just noting the dates the cemetery was active and that it's to commemorate graves marked and unmarked, but that includes civilians. What we're trying to do here is, again, list the veterans. So, Sally, again, I'm very appreciative. We're very lucky to have you, in my opinion, and I hope we can keep you for a while on the team. Thanks again, and let's talk about, I think, bringing this back hopefully in an early April meeting, having been looked at again. Give us some time to sift through because we just got this data. It just went out to the rest of the crew early this evening, and I only had it a day or two and haven't had really a chance. But let's dig in and let's come back with any thoughts, or if there's any last emendation, particularly after your March 27th meeting. And then I think let's get this going. This is important to get done before the tricentennial. And so we're going to do it one way or another. So thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sally.
Thanks, Sal. Much
Much appreciated. I'm going to put you back to attendee. See you later. The last time I tried to do that with someone, I evicted them entirely. I forget who that was. I gave them it was like the bouncer at the club, or the kind of Gronkowski move, sending him out of the club. All right. Sorry that took so long, but I think it's really important. So the next thing we've got is Kelly and Dan weren't able to attend last time, but we did, Kelly, have a fairly extensive discussion, in fact, about your proposal for, an oral history project and this idea of before and after photo scanning. And everybody loves it, and everybody's in support. We you know, I think, and Grant and Michelle, you were here, so correct me when I go off the rails, but we were trying to think a little bit about the mechanisms of it, what the ideal length of such a video would be, what would be the proper forum, whether, for instance, a YouTube channel, there was some discussion about piggybacking on the SAM YouTube website. So, and I'll bring that up a second because it's actually interesting to look at. Let me here you go, right here. Southborough Access Media has playlists, for instance, where they have, by board and committee, but then they've got, coffee talk, express yourself playlist, Southborough Library playlist. So we did have some discussion about whether something, videos so we didn't have to reinvent the wheel, if it might be advisable. And I don't think we came to a conclusion. I'm just telling you what we discussed. Whether it might be advisable to nest those under Sam's YouTube channel and maybe get some technical assistance even from them if they were willing. But do you want to just kind of talk? The other thing, I guess, I think one of the key points, again, Michelle and Grant, chime in, if I get this wrong. There was some discussion about whether there should be sort of a good interviewer goes where the conversation takes them, right? But as a point of departure, if it wouldn't be advisable for us to have a kind of standard set of openers, that you could work up, or maybe, we could help or provide some input about, like, tell us your earliest memory of Southborough, or, do we want to make sure we always ask, when did you first move to Southborough? Or were you born here? Or, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that. If we wanted a standard, that would be flexible, but a standardized script, a target length. We discussed how people would get in touch, whether the commission, Grant, remind me where we were on that. Like if we wanted
Notifications at the senior center.
yeah, like
Yeah.
would there be a box you'd put in a thing? There would be a notice. There'd be I know Kelly, you talked about, like, I know their new. I have a copy of their newsletter.
I'm sure we could put it on my Southborough or
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
like there a notice there, and what would we list? Your email, the historical commission's email, how would the contact be made? All that kind of stuff. And we didn't. I think we left it all quite open, partly because you weren't here, and partly because we were just a little bit unsure. Grant, were you going to reach out to the SAM people and ask them, or am I just imagining that?
I don't believe I was, but I can add that to my list if we want.
Things to do.
Yeah. No,
Anyway,
yeah.
maybe Kelly, do you just want to, like, run us through what your conception of this, so that
Yeah, so first I apologize I wasn't here. I was under the weather. So I really wanted to be here. But I'll give you the run through. I've already talked to the senior center and they're willing to put it in their senior newsletter. And my envision of this would be I would just have a 5-minute conversation with with a senior saying, starting off with, so how long have you lived in Southborough? And tell me a little bit how Southborough was back when you were a kid. And can you tell me a funny story? Like, for instance, my father told me a story. He grew up in Southborough here. He told me a story where there was a store off of Central Street. It was called John Bananas. And there was a Drake's truck there. And the Drake's truck used to deliver all the pastries. And so him and his Cub Scout team went in the back of the truck and they took all the Drake's cakes. But my father dropped his hat and my grandmother used to sew his name in all of his stuff. So getting busted like that is kind of a funny story
Mhm.
that they tracked him down like that. And then he would tell me stories that there was Wentworth's right in the corner of Route 9, where every Halloween they would gather a bunch of tires and put them on top of that building. It was very different back then. It was a close-knit community. So I think those stories would be just, it would remind us of how it used to be. And it just, I hear those stories. Like, I work with Jim Caleri. I work with Austin Bellevue. That's the plumbing inspector and the gas inspector. And they're always telling me funny stories. And I just think that those should get out there. They're just so great. And they have me cracking up all the time. So, I would ask those kind of questions, just laughing with someone, like just hearing a senior's laughter while they're telling that story is so contagious. And so I just want to spread the humor, I guess. So that's what got me thinking about this.
Yeah, I'm, like kind of Tales of Southborough with a loose structure, I think, could work. My question is, for instance, to the rest of the commission, like what, Grant, Dan, Michelle, whether you think it would be useful to have just a kind of, a couple of set questions, because I think asking like a series of people the same thing, the conversation then goes wherever it goes.
Yeah.
But to have a set hook, because then as you watch, of course, you can compare the answers you get from different people, like I don't know, what do you consider, what was the hardest day of your life in Southborough, for instance, and what was it pursuant to some, a storm, a natural disaster, a fire,
Yeah. Like my
no,
father was here for the tornado of 53. Um, and I also think like talking about that John Bananas place off of Central. Now, I guarantee one of you will drive down Central Street and wonder where John Bananas was.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing that will connect you to the history. It's that kind of stuff. So that's kind of really, I wanted to bring a little history to our present.
right,
So
right. Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess what I would do, Kelly, I think that this is pretty exciting and it would be fun, is probably have like a set of questions that you preempt. So you give it to the person you're going to interview because you don't want them have to think about it. They could actually have this in the back of their pocket. So if you ask them the question, they've already thought of it and they've already thought what they're gonna say, and they can they can sensationalize it if they want and make it interesting. I just think that it would be easier for the interviewee to have these questions all probably thought of before the actual interview. So I think that to standardize it would be good.
So when you say a set of questions, do you mean say, oh, like Michelle, I'm going to interview you next week. Here's some questions I want you to think about, and I'm going to like that. Okay, okay.
Yeah. So I'm not saying to ask the same questions, but just give them like a little bit of what our expectations are too.
Okay.
I mean, like a hardship. I mean, you wouldn't ask that to everybody, but you can say, the funniest story or the saddest thing, but you don't have to ask that to everyone. It would lead you on, but they'll already have those ideas in their head.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, yes, I agree. A set of questions that they'll be prepared for. So.
And I do think the other thing is, it's not just old people. I mean, I think that you should sort of do some newcomers, just to have like, what it's like now and what it was like 50 years ago, sort of transgenerational.
Like, when you say that, do you think maybe like if I were to converse with a mother-daughter kind of thing, like
That would,
that?
yeah, that would be
Okay,
awesome.
that's
Yeah,
a great idea,
yeah,
Michelle.
yeah. I think we could all think of some really good questions and brainstorm.
Okay.
I know that oral histories are uh, pretty common in other places, other towns doing this, that kind of thing. So there might be questions out there that are commonly, like frequently asked questions almost for when you're doing an oral history project, the type of question. So, there might be stuff on the web about like as a starting base to go from.
Yeah,
Well, I know there was a book put out, but I think this is taking it a step up, and people are going to see mannerisms and stuff like that, and seeing actual people talk long after they're gone. You know what I mean? So I think this is going to be good. I think it's going to
Yeah.
be fun. It's going to be fun. So
Kelly, I don't know if I had mentioned this in our last meeting, but my wife, Marcy, works for the VA, and so I'm aware of that. They have a project called My Life, My Story, where they have interviewed veterans, sort of in this manner, and they kind of tell, what they want to tell. The veterans are interviewed about their life story, and the interview ends up being, it's an audio podcast, but then it's written up in a sort of first person narrative. Anyway, you can Google this, and it might be, I've watched a bunch of these. They're actually really interesting. They're publicly accessible kinds of things, but it might be interesting to look at how other people do this kind of project, and where there's a consistent approach to engaging people, and then just letting them roll. Because when Michelle's talking about, I agree in a way. It's a very interesting question, like whether you submit to somebody like pre-questions. All of a sudden I'm thinking like the pre-interview on a late night talk show, like where the celebrity knows we're going to serve up this softball. But so people don't feel sort of sandbagged. I think there's some value in that. And then also, but you're trying to balance also getting spontaneity out of people. So I am no expert on interviewing, God knows. So I just think, maybe look around at some of that. Like I said, that VA, My Life, My Story thing is really actually quite interesting. And sometimes it's really moving. As you'd expect, the stories that people have to tell, especially when they're talking about their service. But yeah, I like Michelle's idea too of getting, ultimately a mix of all kinds of people, parents and children and young and old. I think the focus initially, I know Sam Stivers is in the gallery, and I had sort of chatted about this, and I agreed with Sam's position that certainly we want to start at the senior center, if only because you want to get the stories down before you lose them.
yeah.
And some of the maybe the newcomers in town we got longer, hopefully, to get to them. So I'm totally in support of starting on the senior center and trying to really get as much as we can as quickly as we can that way. So I would leave it to you. I know that you've got in the family, right, some technical assistance if you need it. I don't, we live in a kind of lovely age where, you can shoot very high quality video on an iPhone. So I don't know if you feel you need, there's the issue of technical assistance in terms of actual shooting, which may not be necessary. And I don't know if you had even thought about, would the interviewer ever be seen in these videos, or just as a disembodied voice asking questions? Or do you edit it so that there's no interviewer at all. You follow what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of ways to do this. I think the technical gloss is way less important than the stories themselves. And in my vision of this, people who have interesting things to say will shine almost no matter how we do it. But there is, I mean, I'm open to however you want to do this in terms of the actual shooting. And then we have that secondary question about where these videos should reside. And I must admit, I'm kind of appealed to by the idea of making this a SAM playlist. I think because more town residents might go to that site and then see that there's a playlist of, and we can promote it on My Southborough and all that kind of stuff. You know, Beth Malo's been good to us in that respect. That, you know, to draw attention to the fact that these videos exist, but then we wouldn't have to mess around with the uploads as much, maybe, that they, you know, could help us. But sorry, Grant, you had something.
Oh, no. Yeah, on Southborough Access Media, I think I had brought up that idea last meeting, and that was also partly just because like people know it's there and they have like hundreds of subscribers already. Whereas if like we start our own channel or something, like it might not have any viewership or that kind of thing. And oh yeah, the only other thing for me is I don't know, but some people might not want to be on video, but still might want to you know, share their stories. So maybe offering the you know, the option of doing an audio only or something would still capture that. But you know, if they're like camera shy or something, just you know, having that option might be get more people in the door.
Yeah, and actually, Kelly, that gets to another part. I think this did come up in the last conversation. I agree with Grant that we perhaps should have an option for people who are camera shy, that we still get their
Yes.
story.
I thought about that, and what I could do is I could still do an audio, and if they'd allow pictures of them while it's being, the sound is going on in the background, and if they're talking about like a location, I could show pictures of the location as they're speaking in the background.
That's
So
what I was going to say. If you're capable of pulling that off, I mean, again, I don't, you know, like the idea of personally getting into the video editing game is not for me right now. But this sort of segues into the other part of, you know, what we're interested in doing is getting people's photos, borrowing the photos, scanning them in, and returning them. And then if they have images, you know, that could be cut into an interview, you know, as somebody talked about Central Street, or if there was even a shot of, oh yeah, this is where, what was the place called?
John Bananas.
John Bananas. Here it is, you know, this is where it was, kind of thing. That would be fantastic. So
Yeah.
we, you know, yeah, that's something we also talked about, and I think is that right, Michelle? Like very much sort of we're in support of.
Yeah, my other idea was to find pictures or obtain pictures and then take a picture in the same exact area. I'm thinking in the spring when a green is coming out, but yet everything's not full enough where you can get a good picture, and see the then and now. I just think that is so valuable because it shows the history and it shows the present.
Yeah, I think that particularly if you know, you got old photos lent to us by, let's say, interview subjects who had, you know, had a good shot of, you know, pick any corner in town, the way it looked 40, 50, 60 years ago, or in a White's Corner, for instance, you know,
Yeah.
I remember the way it used to be 50 years ago. And then, you know, one of us could go down there and shoot, you know, yeah, this is how it is now, and try to get the, you know, how the Globe used to do that all the time, the exact same angle,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Facebook sites that do that where they get in the same spot and shoot up, Park Street in Boston the way it looked.
Do you know if it's an option to get some of these photos from the historical society?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that, the Michael and the society folks would, be, cooperative and lend us a photo if we needed a specific shot. They're in the process of moving and kind of, as I understand it, recataloging a lot of stuff, and so it's all in flux. It might, but yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. And Michael has of course done a couple books on Southborough, not quite in this format, but in similar, trying to capture images of lost Southborough, for instance. I've got I think I pulled it out the last meeting because it's behind me somewhere over there. So yeah, I think the before and after photo scanning, I think, is part of what I imagine. If you want to, we write up an announcement for the Southborough Seniors Sensation, which is I think the official name of the newsletter, and have a little sign up there, directing people to contact us with their interest. I think it would be wise, as we seek an interview, whether it's on camera or just audio only, to ask, I don't want to overwhelm people by making too many demands, like, now you got to go comb through your attic and look for old photos for us. But I think in conjunction with that, I would ask every interviewee, do you have some photos that you could easily pull out that you're interested in sharing with us? Because we would like to document those photos. And I think the other thing about this is that Grant has tried to do some work with the IT, with Jay and Hassan, about getting more of the documents that we have up on our website. For instance, it's, we need to get the PR of the Burnett Mansion, which is not currently on the Historical Commission's webpage, up there. But I imagine having a link to a photo archive that would, be resident, from clickable, from the Historical Commission's webpage. So that would be, and we could pitch that to the interviewees, that part of what we're trying to do here is catalog and save photos, so that that everybody's greatest fear, right, is their house burns down and they lose everything. That this would be a way to, and I think we would have to make a distinction, though, that we're not, personal photos that, for instance, are just in somebody's backyard and don't really illustrate, there's some value in that. But I think the particular interest would be in photos that, let's say, captured, people in them, but at recognizable locations in town.
Yeah.
Or captured some way that the flavor of the way the town used to be, or when, let's say there were more farms in Southborough, and those pop up in some of the, those Facebook pages. What is it? What's that one, the photo sharing page on Facebook where people post old Southborough photos?
That Scenes of Southborough.
Southborough, yeah, that's quite good. And then, there are people that, Alan Bezinson, people who post, contemporary. I do on occasion, a contemporarily shot photo, but I always find myself particularly interested when someone's got an old photo that they post, of, over the Chestnut Hill Farm or something like that. Those are, for me, the most rewarding.
And I think the photo scanning proposal has merit outside of just the interviews. I mean, like, I think we could just do a call to, a general call for older photos of Southborough, outside of just those interviewees, and
Yeah, that's
I know
true.
that it's really quite hard to find old photos of Southborough, like publicly accessible. I only know of a few places like Digital Commonwealth, Historical Society, that kind of thing, but um, it's really not out there. So if there's any great photos or out there in town or something, I think that's really exciting.
Well, yeah,
I-
Kelly,
oh.
what would you say to us, like as we solicit, for starters, folks at the senior center, that we're interested in your voice, we're interested in your images, but one does not oblige you to the other. In other words, you can come talk to us, meaning you, or you can share photos if you're so inclined and don't want to talk, or do both. I think that would be really important. You know what I mean? Like some people that say, I don't want to talk to you, but yeah, I got some cool old photos. I wouldn't want to put those people off. You know what I'm saying? Like I'd like to get their pictures. I'd like to get their stories. If they want to share both, hoorah, and we can make possibly a better video. So,
There is a way to say it. We just have to say it right.
right.
I agree. I growing up in Southborough, my parents, my grandparents, great grandparents, I have a ton of old photos of Southborough. I have gotten very friendly with a lot of seniors working in the building department, being right underneath there. I know of a few that would be willing to help enough to get a few good pages of a book or a flyer or something, out there. So I'm confident when I say, if I get the word out there, I'll get pictures
Okay, so-
of then and now.
Well, so let's get specific about this, try to move this forward. Are you, what is the consensus in the group here about housing the results of the interviews, if they'll have us, and I can't imagine they would not, under as a playlist on Sam's Southborough Access Media's YouTube page, on the premise, as Grant had advanced, that we're more likely to get a bigger viewership. And it's just really a nesting issue. It's still going to be our playlist and the Historical Commission's initiative and our videos. Interviewee Kelly O'Brien or interviewer Kelly O'Brien. It just a matter of nesting it there if they're willing to have us. Is that everyone agreeable to that?
I
Yes.
am. I think that's a wonderful idea.
All right. Well, I'm going to put that to a vote just so we have it on record.
And I think it might also end up on TV, right? Because public access, they sometimes use filler videos and that kind of thing.
Right. Well,
So,
yeah, that's the thing. It might, play on there. That I think that's the big advantage to it. So, I'll make the motion. The motion is to pursue an alliance with Southborough Access Media to house the videos that we would create to I'm not doing this very well, to memorialize Southborough voices.
Second.
Thank you for being willing to second that prolix motion. Made by Miller, seconded by Farrington. Roll call vote. Miller's aye. Grant,
Aye.
Shell,
Yes.
Ellie,
Yes.
Dan.
Yep.
5-0. Southborough Access Media. Here we come. And then the other thing is, Kelly, you're the lead on this. The question is, do you want help in interviewing someone who is also willing, to do it? I don't know, Michelle, I think you had some interest in this possibly.
Yes, I would love to help out Kelly, so whether it just be holding the phone or
I will take any help I can get. I would
Yes.
love the help, the assistance.
okay.
Good. So I think that's fair. We can put you two on it. And you know, under Grant, Dan, if you're interested, I have no time for this right now. I would personally, Kelly, I would like to get involved at some point. I think it would be fun. I'm just cognizant of my bandwidth right now, which is limited. But Grant or Dan, are you itching to?
Same here. I
Whatever.
think it would be fun, but just got too much going on right now. So thanks, Kelly, for bringing it up and taking it on. I think it's great.
And Dan, where are you at on this?
I'm going to be flat out probably until summer.
Okay.
And so maybe after graduation, and I kind of know what my summer is, but I'll also be curious to see if this is something that senior projects might be interesting.
You mean students? Yeah. And what do you imagine? This is maybe down the road, like who specifically?
I mean, I think as a committee, I think what we need to do is identify places and neighborhoods, and then from there begin to sort the interviews into those kinds of groups of like, do we have a Fayetteville collection? Do we have a 21 Highland collection, right? Do we have right? So I think if we can also go that way, but my nephew did Portsmouth, New Hampshire downtown, though he basically broke it down into the 5 big neighborhoods. And then he traced all of the changes that happened in those neighborhoods for his senior project. And he did it all through interviews and oral communication, right? So really looking at how the face of Portsmouth downtown changed from a working downtown to this kind of what it is now.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think it's a goal, maybe Kelly, like looking forward to, to start to make once you start to get a critical mass of these interviews, to try to make sure that we cover all aspects of town. And like, it's funny, we've had a run on the historic house signs, down on Wood Street, down by the Sudbury River and the kind of the other side, like almost into Hopkinton. It's a very interesting little neighborhood, and I've been down there now and have given out 4 signs on that little street. And so I've gotten to know, I've met a bunch of the neighbors down there, and boy, did they have an interesting little enclave. Very sweet little neighborhood, and kind of it's a very specific history because all those houses were built as mill housing, so I think that would be actually a cool, as Dan suggests, a cool goal going forward to try to say, well, what about, the Brigham Pond area, Fayetteville, Southville, the center, and so on. But so what I would say, and I don't think we need to vote on this, but is go do it. Just go, start, go, figure it out. Write up do we need want Kelly to submit, the call? I mean, this to me is pretty straightforward. You want to be interviewed. We want to talk to you. We want your story. You have pictures. We want to scan them. Like I would just, if I think it's okay. Probably, well, Kelly, you'll be able to give us the clerk's office opinion on this, whether you and Michelle can work together on this without, I don't want to run afoul, of anything, but I think that's
I think it's less than a quorum, right? A quorum is 4 for us.
right.
So.
And they're not working up documents. Anything that's produced is going to, be out in the public. So, but let's get some clarity on that. But if that's clear, we'll ask Mr. Haggerty, I would say go forward unless there's any objection. Let's get this rolling. In other words, too much talk and not enough action kind of thing. So everybody good on this? And we know where we want to put it. I think the photos, I would like to, create a photo archive that was accessible, and we can get some advice from Jim Haggerty might be a good resource on this. But the IT folks, but to get these photos cataloged in some manner, I mean, that's going to be a task. You might, you're biting off a lot here. But to get this stuff properly cataloged, to get it up accessible from the Historical Commission's website, and then get the video interviews up on Sam's website. Kelly, can you reach out to Sam, that Southborough Access Media, and tell them what we want?
Sure, I
And ask
can.
them how they can help?
I
would-
absolutely can.
I would appreciate that. And so can we move
Kevin,
on? Is everybody good with this?
just a quick thing, Kevin. In terms of getting things up on the website, I know we haven't talked about it as a commission yet, but we do now have online document storage space that we all have access to, like a OneDrive for Historical Commission. So if it's a large photo organizing project or something, they could live there perhaps.
You got that through Jay set that up for us, right? Great. So
I saw that and I wondered what, I saw the file and I didn't know what it was about.
Oh yeah, it's
one
right now, there's nothing in there, right? It's empty, but we will be able to add it's our own kind of commission online document storage essentially. So
yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Many thanks to Jay Montego for that, getting us going on this. So we're getting we're getting in the position where we can actually do this stuff. So thank you, Kelly, and I look forward to seeing where this goes. Go get them, Michelle. All right, so chair's report. I'll try to be quick. 21 Highland Future Use Committee. We met on Tuesday. We are 2 days ago. We are making some progress. I hope there'll be. I'm hoping there'll be quite a bit more. There are plans to do a kind of presentation to the community just about the circumstances around the building and the history of it, which the commission may well have a role in. And then what's most important to me is some sort of public forum that would be soliciting particularly what the people who live close by 21 Highland Street think or want or envision or dream about that building. A lot, of course, as you know, is dependent on space needs, maneuvers, and votes on schools, all upcoming in town meeting. So basically stay tuned. The water tower CPC application, this is kind of an interesting, I'll try to tell this story real quick, is, and Grant can clarify anything I get wrong here, that the Community Preservation Committee had asked me, we're sponsoring with the support and input of the DPW head, a CPC application to rehab the Rural Cemetery water tower, on which we've already put a plaque noting its historic significance. It needs a roof, it needs woodwork, it needs a couple windowsills and louvers and things like that. So CPC, and I was pleased by their stance on this, said, we really want to make sure that we do it to the Secretary of Interior standards to a very high level and in a way that it'll last. And the concern was mostly about the roof and what it was. I had surmised, based on age, the year that asphalt shingles were invented, which is the same year that the tower was erected, that the tower had originally been roofed with cedar shakes. But we're really looking to try to get as accurate a read on that particular question as possible. So the CPC asked me and Mr. Cundiff to do a little more work in that department. Mr. Cundiff had a notion about a historic roofing contractor that he was aware of, and we asked that person to come out and give us a read on it and an estimate, so we had a better figure for CPC. That person met us out at the site one Monday morning a couple weeks ago, but then ghosted us on the actual bid of the information. So I was sort of left in a tough spot. And then a couple CPC meetings got canceled for this or that reason, quorum issues or posting issues, which gave me some time to go back to the drawing board. And where I went was the historical consultant route. And I had very long conversations and very productive conversations, first with Wendy Frontiero, who was the architectural historian and architect who had consulted. Michelle's nodding because you know the name. She was the woman that did preliminary work, a lot of work in the early going on the National Register District. So has good familiarity with Southborough. Wendy, at the conclusion of our conversation, said, you really need to talk to this guy, Brian Pfeiffer. And he's a Cambridge architectural historian and actually the principal of the Archipedia New England website, which is sort of a compendium of New England architecture. And it's got, 40 years experience managing these kinds of projects all over New England. He and I had a very extensive conversation, very productive, very fruitful. And ultimately he said, the guy you need to talk to is someone named Dennis Semperbon, who is a restoration contractor more in this area, who has worked in all kinds of projects all over New England and was a longtime instructor at the North Bennett Street School, which is sort of the premier training ground in New England for restoration specialists. So I connected with that gentleman. We had a long and very productive conversation, and he's really and I sent him a lot of photos and stuff, and he's enthusiastic about the project. And where I'm at now is I'm desperately trying to get him out here on the double, because as I understand it, CPC meets a week from tonight. And they're running out of time on this cycle for the Springtown meeting. So if we can pull it together, we might get some good news on this subject, but I just want you to know that I am really trying hard. And it's actually been useful, because one of the goals that I have, I don't know if we've talked about it that much here, I know briefly, is I want to be better tapped into that system, particularly of trades and crafts people that can do this kind of work, because I'd like to be able to have up on our website, speaking of things on our website, a list of not recommended, but simply potential restoration carpenters, for instance, for people. One of the first house signs we gave out in the Revive program was to a couple that I had a long conversation with them, talking about their efforts to find a carpenter to build them custom wooden storm windows, because they were really hardcore, about the historic authenticity. So to have a list of those resources could only benefit us. And so I feel pretty good about getting tapped into, better than I have been, to these kinds of people. So anyway, we'll see. I only have demolition delay bylaw revision listed here to let you know that talking with Michael Wyson recently, he said, well, we paid for a bunch of legal work. This is before I came on the commission, or before any of you have been on the commission, about the DDBL. And I said, well, can I have it? And he sent it. And so I've got it now. And I haven't had a chance to review it yet. And I know Grant has separately, entirely independent of me, been looking at this matter himself. So it's simply to say that I hope once we get a few other things cleared up, that we can start now. Michael's like, well, we paid several $1,000s for this research. We have it. And I said, well, again, please give it to me. So he has. I will start looking at it, and I hope at a future meeting to bring it all in front of you, as we need to do an open meeting so that we can all discuss it together. Members' reports, item 5. What else is there to say about CPC, right? Great. You're meeting next Thursday.
Yep, we're meeting next week. We've already taken a few votes on a couple of the applications, and as you said, Kevin, we've kind of delayed a couple of them. So we haven't yet voted on. Well, we have voted on the fire engine, the town common railing, and then the 2 applications for the flag school and the South Union School. We aren't going to vote on them, but we sent a letter to the applicant informing them, or we're going to send a letter informing them why the applications are incomplete. And then the 2 that are remaining that we will have to vote on are, as you said, the water tower, as well as the affordable housing application, which is before us. So I'm not sure if we're actually going to be voting at that meeting or not. We may be, but definitely we snuck in a quick meeting during the day last week, I think, and so we'll have some more time in the evening to discuss it next week.
And by the way, the affirmative vote on the town common fencing is, of course, a win for the Historical Commission, because we are the official co-sponsors of this, along with the select board. And Andrew Dennington and I sort of appeared together in front of CPC to pitch this. So that's really good news. I had one question, Grant, about this. Just for my own clarity's sake, the fire truck restoration proposal, which received an affirmative vote, I believe you were the vote against, right? I think 5-1.
That's right. Yep.
Out of, just for my clarity, because somehow I've missed this, what bucket is that money coming out of? Because the way I understand CPC is that there are different buckets for.
Yeah, so it's a historic project. I don't think we've actually gotten to the point of determining whether or not it would come from the historic bucket or the kind of the unreserved fund, which is about 65% that can be used for any of the purposes. So when we write the warrant article, we'll actually determine how much will come from each fund. My understanding is that for historic projects, a lot of them have been coming out of the general, common purpose bucket, because much of the historic bucket has been taken up by bond payments on 84 Main Street, the townhouse, and the library. So I could be wrong, but I don't believe we've determined exactly where it's coming from. It doesn't qualify for open space or recreation.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, and I appreciate it. And I pretty much had that in my head, but wanted to be sure. Okay, tricentennial, and I actually put reenact. I meant to strike that, Michelle, but just simply if there was anything new. One thing, can I throw in on the tricentennial, is that at our last meeting, I think we had some brief discussion about the question came up, why were the commemorative bricks $300, and it's because it's the tricentennial, which somehow eluded all of us at the time.
Yes.
But I wanted to make that clarification that that's the reason, and I'm happy to do so. So, Michelle, what else is going on?
Thank you.
So,
Actually, I feel that they're going to start to move fast. I mean, it sounds like it's, that we have all this time, but in fact, when you meet once a month, you don't have all the time. So all of the members have sort of taken one of the events under their wings. So we've now divided, and we're now looking for volunteers. So sort of the subcommittees are now being aligned, and we now have a calendar of the events, and we have the events down except for there's still one that's still up in the air, and that's of course because of cost, and that's the drone show, because that could, depending how much money we have to spend, that's the limiting factor there. But I feel that, we have a parade, a gala, skating parties, strawberry festival, a house and garden tour, because the Southborough Gardeners are willing to help us now. So they're becoming involved in that. And of course, the graveyard reenactment, which is the historic part of it, the drone or laser show, and I think that's about it. And I think so we still of course have the fundraising. So we're still at the Bricks. It's been a little bit slow because of the weather. You'll be seeing myself at the transfer station, probably with Sam shortly. So I guess one of the things that we're really missing is sort of like an organization. So we have a bunch of lists of volunteers who have signed up and things like that. So we're getting software to put emails together to really organize. But I feel that things are really moving in the positive direction, and I think it's going to be a great celebration. So we're still looking for volunteers, and I'm not so sure about the fundraising, because I heard that a couple of the fundraising committee members had some life events. So, they're sort of taken a back seat there, and Ginny and the brick fundraising is our main focus at the moment.
Well, if your ice skating party had been this week, you could have had it in the driveway.
I did notice that, Kevin.
Yeah, that's the downfall of a gravel driveway in this
Mhm.
sequence of weather you have. It's very hard.
Mhm.
But anyway, all right, thank you.
All fun things.
On to, well, actually, I want to just back up. One thing I see that I neglected to touch on the agenda. This will take 2 seconds. We were talking about the OBG and the graves and stuff, and I also mentioned that Cemetery Commission proposal, just FYI, I spoke on behalf of Historical, because we had discussed this and come out in support of it, is that Mr. Cundiff, the DPW head, would like to see a reconstituted cemetery commission. There currently is not one. And he has manifold reasons, many of them having to do with sort of process and organization and appeals by applicants for waivers of this and that. But it would also benefit, in my view, and that's how I pitched it to you folks when we did discuss it, that it would benefit us to have a more structured approach to the management of the cemeteries, both the old burial ground and the rural cemetery. And so I just wanted to let you know that I did show up at a select board meeting and voiced, as historical chair, our support for that proposal, because I think it would help expedite things like the tree trimming, for instance, in the OBG, which has been an issue as long as I've been in town, and the risk that a lack of timely trimming poses to the historic headstones, which is, of course, you see how it's connected to, this issue that we've got 36 Revolutionary War veterans. Most of those were lost in the hurricane of 38. Some of them have been lost to down limbs. So anyway, back now to item 6, which is approving meeting minutes of January 14th, 2025. Are there any, have you all, Grant, those went out, right? Everyone's had a chance.
Yep.
I looked at them. I know I gave my
Yes.
edit. And any further edits on the meeting minutes of January 14th? Is there a motion then to approve the meeting minutes of January 14th, 2025?
I make a
2020.
motion to approve the minutes of January, what day was it? January what?
14th.
14th.
14.
Second.
Thank you. So moved by Michelle, seconded by Grant. Roll call vote to approve the meeting minutes of 1/14/2025. Miller is yes. Grant,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
and
Yes,
Kelly.
I'm going to refrain because I was not at the meeting.
Okay, so 401 on the meeting minutes. They are approved. I have no other business, thankfully. Is there any public comment?
Oh, Kevin, should we?
Oh, I did it again.
Yeah.
Every single time. I'm incorrigible. We need to schedule. Isn't that what you're going to tell me, Grant?
That's
That
right. It's the second. I think we should put it out on its own line item, perhaps.
I think so, because I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
some kind of congenital problem with doing that. Um,
Why don't we
Okay.
make the meeting like the third Wednesday, or like just make it uniform like every month?
it's a possibility. For now, I'm looking at, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Were we talking about early April?
Yeah, that might be smart because
Or March? I don't know.
well, Sally's got this. I was just looking at the 27th of March, but I remember this is 27th of March is when Sally is getting her final. She's like seeing, who was it? Oz.
American Genealogical Society.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I think in Worcester, right? And I think it might be nice to wait until after she's been able to do that. What about April 3rd? That's Thursday, April 3rd. It's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks.
Sounds good to me.
That works on my end.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
That gives me and Michelle some time to give you guys some
Right to
feedback.
get going.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan, how's that for you?
I think that
April 3rd?
works.
Okay, Thursday, April 3rd it is. And we'll take the month of March off and we can get our taxes done or something, maybe. Oh, all right. No other business. We're back to public comment. No one's got anything to say. It's only Sally and Sam there. Speak up. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion to
I
adjourn.
second it.
Great. Kelly made the motion. Michelle seconded. Motion to adjourn. Roll call vote. Miller's aye. Grant.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Dan.
Aye.
Michelle.
Yes.
5-0 to get out of here. Notice I threw you off too by mixing up the order. I try to do it in the same. I feel like should we train ourselves up the way for instance, the planning board does it? They do it unprompted. They know it's like there's a kind of pecking order. You have to say your name you know what I mean?
I think it's
And
order of seniority or
I think
time
it
on
is.
committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I actually mostly try to call on people, but they're so well trained. It's like I was always very impressed. I remember watching early meetings of the planning board because I thought that they perform like a troupe. They come out and they all hit their marks. We could try that at some point, but maybe for another day. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. And have a good week.
Great.
You too.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Have a good one.
Okay, Kelly, you can knock on my door.
I will. Bye.
Bye-bye.